Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is a screencast-matic presentation and recording for the part of the lesson that has looking at the Mongols and the Mongol Empire in world history. Before we get started, please let me encourage you to open up to today's lesson and to fill in the content portions with the blanks with key content that coincides with the notes accordingly. Please also remember that you can replay any part of this presentation for detail or clarity or repetition later on. Let's go ahead and get started and talk about one of the most notable empires in world history. The Mongols, their conquest and their impact on the world. Think about this question. What was the impact of the Mongolian Empire on the world, and why do we have to talk about this in a world history and world cultures class? Well, the simple fact is that the Mongolian Empire was one of the biggest empires to ever rule and to ever have dominion in the entire world, as depicted here. But who were the Mongols exactly? Well, the Mongols were among numerous nomadic tribes who lived in Central Asia. What makes them iconically known is their ability to travel from place to place, but yet to establish a substantial empire that lasted throughout many years. Nomads were able to adopt the culture of the lands that they conquered. Christians developed two cultures over in Europe at the same time, and other parts of the Asian continent were able to adopt Chinese culture and Indian religion. Now, this animation here might very much well show where early Mongolian origins came up from. Although the steppes, climate, and region were dry and windy grasslands, harsh climates and extreme temperatures of the steppes were the main features of Mongolia's geography. Over time, however, what would happen is that the Mongols lived in the Asian steppes and managed to survive and thrive. So Mongolia was a region where only the strong survived. In many ways, the geography and climate helped them sustain a very brute population. Now, additionally, only 1% of Mongolia's land was good for farming, so Mongols were pastoralists, which were shepherds and livestock farmers who herded animals. As the summer herds thinned out during the winter, making milk and meat scarce, the only way for Mongols to survive was by raiding other neighboring clans and stealing their herds. So, by cultural practice and design, the Mongols in many ways practiced this art over years and became successful at it. Mongols lived in nomadic clans, and they were often on the move, traveling on horseback, going from place to place, searching for better pasture lands for their herds. In many ways, this is what made them nomadic. The members of the clans were related and descended from a common ancestor, though, and because the clans raiding each other's herds, toughness and ability to fight were highly valued among the Mongols. As you guys are aware, in certain cultures around the world, different cultural values and customs are embellished and further developed upon. It would take a strong leader to unite all the warring Mongol clans together into one group. Enter Genghis Khan. That strong leader would be a man named Temujin, who was born around 1162. When Temujin became undisputed leader of all Mongol tribes after a series of battles, he took the name Genghis Khan, which means universal ruler. Now, what makes him interesting as a fighting force or as a clan leader was that he was able to bring a lot of diverse peoples in the Mongolian steppe and world under his rule. Of course, this would all take time. What's really notable about Genghis Khan is that equally intelligent and vicious Genghis Khan would lead the creation of the largest land empire in human history, with successful means of administrative rule and, of course, warring military force. From 1200 to 1206, Genghis united all of the Mongol clans under his common rule. Additionally, what makes him notable is that Genghis Khan built a powerful army out of the Mongols and began a 21-year-long conquest of Asia and parts of Europe. This conquest would prove to be hard but yet successful for the Mongols overall. Additionally, led by Genghis, the Mongols began taking new territory in 1207, first going after China. Genghis wanted control of the Silk Road and the valuable trade routes between Asia and Europe, so he made it his top priority to gain control of such a route. The Mongols had conquered the kingdom called Jia in northern China and then attacked the Qin dynasty, bringing all the China under Genghis Khan's control systematically. Mongol cruelty is well renowned. And after conquering China, Genghis took over most of Central Asia. As you can see here by this map of the Mongolian Empire, he did so with great speed and with great force. For example, by the year 1241, the Mongols retreat after Khan's death. However, by other years and other marks, by 1260, the Mongols stopped by Mamluks of Egypt, and the Abbasid Empire falls to the Mongols. So we're talking about over here in the Middle East. The Mongols were even able to conquer the Song Empire in China, and the Mongols failed to conquer Japan over here, which makes sense because it was an emerging island nation. However, you can see here by this map and diagram that they were able to be quite successful. Future Mongol leaders after Genghis Khan's rule increased Mongol borders to its greatest extent, which was the largest land empire in history, as we stated before. Another thing to note here about the Mongols is their administrative rule was also something that worked for them too. As a result of their lifestyle, however, and the environment, the Mongols were natural horsemen and extremely tough and skilled warriors. They were able to travel on horseback, and many of them were able to learn how to do so at a very young age. Additionally, to being able to be a natural horseman, the Mongols were able to adapt at using bow and arrows and archery while riding too. This made them even more feared upon the people that they attempted to take over. Not only did horses allow them to travel at faster speeds, but their speed on horseback, weapons, and fighting skill altogether made the Mongols an unstoppable enemy. As you can see here by this diagram, this further embellishes that idea. The cavalry warrior's weapons included leather armor, a lance, a dagger, a bow and arrow, and a stout and sturdy horse. And under his armor, each cavalry warrior wore silk underwear, which arrows often did not pierce. The warriors could use the silk to help pull the arrow clearly out of a wound if need be in battle. Some other items of note here that are really important. The extremely strong and flexible compound bow was a super weapon of its time. This might seem primitive to you, but I can bet that in these times in world history, in terms of taking on a fighting force, the Mongols were able to use this to their advantage. It could shoot arrows faster and more accurately than any bow before it, and if fired properly, it could pierce armor at 190 miles per hour. Groups of archers could rain arrows on the enemy from 300 yards away, which is pretty intense when you think about it. Now, additionally, Genghis Khan was a highly intelligent military commander. He would often trick enemies into attacking using small forces to lure them into traps, where the rest of the Mongol army would appear and then destroy them. Also, Genghis assembled the Mongols into very organized war machines, often by rank and file. The military, in many ways, was ruled just as efficiently and, of course, with good administration, just as their governmental bureaucracies were. Now, in terms of building an empire, another reason why the Mongols were just so deadly is that they adapted from each group of people that they conquered. The Mongols would pick up new tactics and weapons, such as the Chinese siege weapons and even gunpowder, and become masterful at using them. Many people who began to, of course, fear Mongol cruelty had every reason to do so, as the Mongols would become more emboldened with every place that they systematically took over. Genghis Khan's army quickly gained a reputation for extreme cruelty during battle. And additionally, if an enemy refused to surrender, Genghis would order the death of that entire population, torturing and killing every soldier and civilian, even children. One story of Mongol cruelty: after the Mongols took a Persian city that resisted, the governor of the city was brought alive to Genghis. He ordered molten gold to be poured down the governor's throat. I can only imagine how horrible that must have been to witness. Now, as brilliant as a strategist as Genghis Khan was, his greatest weapon was the spread of terror and fear. As the Mongols' fearsome reputation spread, many towns and villages would surrender even without a fight, as Mongol cruelty became so well known and notorious. As a 13th century historian wrote of the Mongols, they are inhuman, more like monsters than men. I would say that in given everything we talked about and know about them, this is quite accurate. Even in Genghis Khan's own words, one can gather just what type of person this is. The greatest happiness is to scatter your enemy, and, of course, to drive him before you, to see his cities reduced to ashes, to see those who love him shrouded in tears, and to take his wives and daughters. If this quote doesn't explain who this person is to the core, then I'm not sure what does. Additionally, while merciless in battle, the Mongols were surprisingly tolerant of their conquered subjects in times of peace. You see, guys, in many ways, they were tolerant of the faith that you happened to be a part of, as long as you were subservient to Mongol rule. Now, the Mongols never forced their way of life on conquered people, which in many ways is a sign of good empirical rule. Instead, they often adopted cultures of those that they ruled over. In many ways, this is, too, cultural diffusion at work. Additionally, in the West, in this part of the empire anyway, some Mongols converted to Islam. And as you're aware, Islamic rule is just as powerful throughout world history as anything. And in the East, Mongols embraced Chinese culture as well. So clearly, as the Mongolian Empire was becoming bigger and more diverse, so too were the cultural enclaves within them. Additionally, as long as the conquered people paid tribute, like we said before, to the Mongol rulers, they would live free. Genghis controlled his warriors' ferocity, though, And he often used rape and plunder in this way as a means of torture and, of course, as war advancement. Although, of course, over time, Genghis would speak out against rape and plunder, in many ways this was strictly forbidden over time. Genghis also shared his power that he gave his finest warriors leadership positions throughout the Mongolian Empire. This type of leadership would prove to be incredibly helpful and beneficial for great administration of the empire. Interaction between Mongols and conquered Muslims, however, mostly happened in Persia and in western China. And after initial brutality, the Mongols showed much religious toleration towards the Muslims. Muslim merchants were invited to China to promote trade between the Mongols and their empire and the Middle East and their empires. And as you're aware, trade can help unite people and bring about prosperity across huge amounts of people. The Muslim pilgrim Ibn Battuta, who traveled from 73,000 miles away in his lifetime, remarked of the toleration for Muslims from the Mongols to them. Now, Muslims living in the Mongols' empire had a separate sphere in each city and were treated with a lot of respect too. Interactions between the Mongols and conquered Christians mostly happened in Russia, and the Mongols killed many Christians, but not because of their religion, but mostly because the reason was because of Christian resistance to Mongolian rule. Now, the death of Genghis Khan would bring about a new chapter for Mongolian history. After Genghis Khan's death from an illness in 1227, the Mongols under the Khans continued to expand the Mongolian Empire, and they would do so under a different person who we're going to learn about next. Please proceed to the next part of the presentation. Thank you.